Hey, you're here for a creepy Valentine story, right? Pull up a chair. Let's get into it. I'm Kyle, just a regular guy, I spend my days covered in grease at the local garage here in, well, let's just call it a sleepy town. Nothing much happens around here. And romance? Not really my scene. I mean, I've had my share of dates, but nothing serious. Not since Jenna, but that's old news. So last Valentine's, things got a bit weird. I started getting these letters. Yeah, love letters, if you can believe it. At first, I thought it was a prank, from the guys at the shop. But man, it didn't take long before I wished it was just their idea of a joke. These letters, they started off sweet, but things escalated quickly, and not in a good way. Let me tell you, I've seen some stuff in my life, but nothing quite like this. It's one thing to have a secret admirer, but it's another when admiration turns into something darker. And that's exactly where my story begins. My life. It's the definition of ordinary. I'm the guy who fixes your car, shares a beer at the local bar, and watches football on weekends. Small town living, Everyone's in everyone's business. And love life? Non-existent since Jenna. We were high school sweethearts, but things fizzled out. That's life, I guess. This town, it's one of those places where a cat up a tree makes front page news. Quiet, almost too quiet. Folks are friendly, but there's always that undercurrent of knowing everyone's secrets. Then, last Valentine's Day, it started. I found this envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. Handwritten, no return address. To the one who steals hearts, it said on the front. I remember chuckling, thinking someone got the wrong car. Inside, this neat, curly handwriting talked about my smile and how it brightened the dreary days of our little town. Flattering, sure, but I couldn't shake off this feeling of, being watched. I brushed it off then. But looking back, I wish I'd paid more attention to that feeling. The letters kept coming, each one a bit more intense than the last. At first, they were kind of cute. I admire your work ethic. Your laugh is contagious. Stuff like that. But then, they started mentioning things nobody should know. Like how I stopped for coffee at Marge's diner every Thursday, or that I'd helped Mrs. Henderson with her groceries last week. It was flattering at first, a secret admirer noticing me. But as the letters got more personal, it stopped being flattering and started getting creepy. They described the clothes I wore, how I'd absent-mindedly run my hand through my hair when thinking. That's when I started looking over my shoulder, One letter even mentioned the scar on my left hand, a keepsake from a childhood bike accident. That's when the paranoia really kicked in. How did they know about that? I found myself scanning faces in the crowd, wondering who it could be. Everyone became a suspect. It was like living in one of those psychological thrillers, except it was my life, and it was far from thrilling. Then one day, it all took a terrifying turn. The letters went from creepy to outright disturbing. One described how they loved watching me sleep, how peaceful I looked. That sent chills down my spine. Who was this person? How close had they gotten to me without me knowing? One evening, I felt it. Eyes on me. I was walking home, and there was this unmistakable sensation of being followed. I'd turn around, and there was nobody there, but the feeling wouldn't go away. My heart pounded as I picked up the pace, every shadow and sound making me jump. The worst part, I got home and found something on my doorstep. It was a photograph of me asleep in my bed. No note, just that picture. That's when I knew this wasn't some admirer. This was someone dangerous, someone who had been inside my house while I slept. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside, it felt like they were there watching me. The letters turned extremely dark. Graphic descriptions of what we could do together, twisted fantasies mixed with declarations of a love that was sickening, not sweet. One even hinted at a final act to bring us closer. I couldn't stomach it. I felt trapped. In this small town, I should have felt safe, but instead I was isolated, suspicious of everyone. Could it be the friendly waitress? The quiet guy at the gas station? Trust. Something I took for granted became a luxury I couldn't afford. The paranoia was eating me alive. I jumped at shadows, saw sinister intent in every glance. My friends noticed the change. I'd snap at them, accuse them of prying when they were just concerned. My life was spiraling out of control, and I felt powerless to stop it. I was living in constant fear, every moment tainted by the thought of this unseen, unknown admirer. The final letter arrived, and it was the most unsettling of them all. It spoke of a meeting, a climax to our love story, as it called it. The words were veiled, but the threat was clear. It was coming, whatever it was. I live in constant vigilance now. My life's changed, twisted by fear and suspicion. I watch the shadows, listen for footsteps that aren't mine. I'm a prisoner in my own home, in my own mind. The admirer never found out who it was. Maybe that's the worst part, living with the unknown. Every ring of the phone, every knock at the door, it could be them, or maybe just my imagination fueled by fear. So, that's my story. No neat ending, no closure. Just a lingering question: who watches me in the quiet of this little town? Okay, so where do I start? I'm Sam, by the way. Just your average Joe, really. Never been one for the woo-woo stuff. Ghosts, spirits, all that jazz. Give me something I can see and touch, and I'll believe it. But this story, it's got me questioning everything. So, me and my buddies, we're this tight group, always ribbing each other, pushing each other's buttons. We've got this tradition. You see, doing something totally outlandish every Valentine's. Guess we're a bunch of romantics, huh? Last year, just for kicks, someone threw out the idea of a séance. A séance on Valentine's Day. I laughed it off, but they were serious. And me? I figured, what the heck? Let's see what this is all about. I was in for a shock, though. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. Always been a skeptic. That's me. You see, I grew up in a family of scientists. Dinner table talk was more about the latest in tech and medicine, not ghost stories. So naturally, I inherited this seeing is believing attitude. Ghosts, spirits, all that, just fanciful tales to me. Then there's my crew, a bunch of eccentrics, each with their own quirks. We've known each other since high school, shared everything from first crushes to first jobs. We love pushing each other's boundaries, especially when it comes to beliefs. It's all in good fun, but sometimes things get a bit out there. Valentine's Day was coming up, and trust this group to come up with something bizarre. We've done it all: anti-Valentine's parties, horror movie marathons. But this time, they dropped a real bomb. A séance. They knew about my skepticism, and I guess they saw it as a challenge. Let's see if we can spook Sam, they said. I laughed it off, agreed more out of amusement than anything else. Little did I know, I was in for a night I'd never forget. The night of the séance, we gathered in Mia's old, creaky house. It had the perfect eerie vibe. Candles, dim lights, and, for effect, a makeshift Ouija board. We all sat around, half serious, half joking. I remember rolling my eyes, making wisecracks. What are we summoning? The spirit of Cupid? I joked. As we started, I played along, still chuckling. But then weird stuff began happening. The room grew inexplicably cold. We thought Mia was messing with the thermostat. Then the candles flickered wildly, even though there was no draft. I was still skeptical, but a bit less vocal about it. Then, the planchette on our makeshift Ouija board started moving. "Okay, who's pushing it?" I asked, looking around. Everyone denied it. It spelled out hello. A prank, I thought. But something in the air felt off, and for the first time, my skepticism wavered. The seance took a darker turn. The room got colder, and the candles flickered more violently. We were all silent now, the joking long gone. The planchette moved again, spelling out Sam. My heart skipped a beat. "Okay, guys, who's doing this?" I demanded. But the fear in their eyes told me they were just as clueless. Then, a loud bang from upstairs made us all jump. Mia swore her house was empty. We heard what sounded like footsteps, but heavier, unnatural. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. I was scared, really scared. The climax came when the planchette spelled out behind you. I slowly turned around, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shadow, a figure standing there. I blinked, and it was gone. But the fear, the absolute terror I felt in that moment, was real. The room felt heavy, suffocating. We ended the seance right there, but the feeling, it lingered. After the seance, we all just sat there stunned. Some of my friends laughed nervously, suggesting it was a prank. But the laughter was hollow, forced. Others sat in silence, visibly shaken. I couldn't shake off what I'd seen, what I'd felt. It was like my entire belief system had been turned upside down. I kept trying to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a trick or our imaginations. That night changed something in me. I couldn't just dismiss it as a spooky Valentine's prank. It felt too real, too personal. I found myself questioning everything I'd ever believed about the world, about what's possible and what's not. So, here I am telling you this story with no real ending. The seance, that night, it's like a puzzle with missing pieces. I can't explain what happened, and maybe I never will. It's left me with this constant unease. This question in the back of my mind. What if there's more to this world than we can see? I still hang out with the same group, but things are different now. We don't talk about that night. It's like this unspoken agreement. But every Valentine's Day, I can't help but remember, and I wonder, was it real? Were we just scaring ourselves, or did we awaken something that night? And me, the skeptic, I'm left pondering the impossible, the unexplained. That's the story of my Valentine's Day seance. No neat conclusions, just lingering questions and a newfound respect for the unknown. You know, I used to think Valentine's Day was all about chocolates and cheesy cards. But let me tell you, a few years back, something happened that changed the way I look at it forever. We were just a bunch of kids back then. High school seniors, thinking we owned the world. We hung out, played pranks, lived for the moment. Valentine's was just another excuse to have fun until we made that pact. It was a silly thing, made on a whim, but it's haunted me ever since. So, here I am sharing this with you. Maybe it's a cautionary tale, or maybe I just need to get it off my chest. Either way, it's a story worth telling. And trust me, it's not your typical Valentine's Day fluff. Growing up, My life was pretty standard. Small town, close-knit community, the usual. Nothing extraordinary ever really happened to me. I was just Nate, the kid who loved basketball and comic books, nothing more. My friends, though, they were a different story. We were a group of 5, inseparable since middle school. We had this adventurous streak, always pushing the envelope. Daredevils, you could call us. We'd challenge each other to do the craziest stuff, all in the name of fun. Come senior year, Valentine's Day was approaching, and we wanted to do something memorable, something that would symbolize our bond. So we came up with this pact. It was bizarre, I admit. We swore that if any of us ever got our hearts broken on Valentine's Day, the others would carry out a dare of the heartbroken guy's choosing. Back then, it seemed like a cool idea, a way to stick together no matter what. Little did we know how that pact would come back to haunt us. The pact was simple yet daring. If any of us got our hearts broken on Valentine's Day, the rest would have to carry out a specific dare, something that the heartbroken friend chose. It was a mix of teenage bravado and a deep sense of loyalty. The dare could be anything, from confessing feelings to a crush to pulling off a ridiculous stunt. We saw it as a testament to our friendship, a way to stand by each other during the toughest of times. It was our promise to never let one of us face heartbreak alone. We sealed it with a handshake, not knowing the weight it would carry in the years to come. Time flew by and we all drifted into our lives. College, jobs, relationships, the usual stuff. We stayed in touch, but it wasn't the same as those high school days. The pact, it became one of those fond memories we'd laugh about during reunions, a relic of our youth. Then, last year, it resurfaced. It was Valentine's Day, and I got a call from one of the guys, Mark. His voice was shaky. "Remember the pact?" he said. His girlfriend had broken up with him, on Valentine's Day no less. The pact, our long-forgotten promise, suddenly felt very real and very serious. I felt this knot in my stomach. We were no longer those carefree teenagers, and the reality of what we had promised years ago hit me hard. The pact was no longer just a memory. It was an obligation. Mark's heartbreak had triggered it. He was serious about invoking the pact, and his chosen dare. It was far from the innocent stunts of our youth. He wanted us to break into the abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. The place was notorious, cloaked in rumors of hauntings and tragedies. I was torn. Part of me screamed it was a terrible idea. But another part, bound by the loyalty of our past, felt compelled to honor the pact. The moral conflict was intense. The dangers were real, both legal and, considering the asylum's history, possibly even physical. Yet, the weight of our youthful promise hung over me. As the day approached, the tension among us was palpable. We were no longer those invincible teenagers, but the pull of our past, of that unbreakable bond we once shared, was strong. The question loomed, would we really go through with it? So, there we were in the old asylum, our hearts racing, half expecting ghostly figures to emerge from the shadows. The place was creepy, sure, but the real scare came when we heard the sirens outside. Turns out, someone had spotted us entering and called the cops. Caught red-handed, we tried to explain, but ended up with a hefty fine for trespassing. In the end, the most frightening thing about that night was the prospect of explaining it all to our families. We left the asylum with nothing more than legal issues and a story that, in retrospect, seemed more foolish than frightening. It was an anticlimactic end to our daring pact. A reminder that sometimes the real world can be scarier than any ghost story